The palace of the Xylan stretched across the blackness of space like a dark crown, its spires reaching toward the glittering stars. On the highest balcony, the Empress of the Xylan stood alone, her long robes flowing in the artificial breeze of the observation chamber. Her eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were dull with grief. The loss of her only child weighed heavily upon her, a wound deeper than any battlefield scar. Her son, Prince Kalen, had been more than a child to the Empire. He was the future, the hope of generations. Now he was gone, taken by a war that had erupted in the outer sectors of their territory. The news had arrived weeks ago, carried by trembling messengers and coded transmissions. Every detail haunted her: the explosion of his ship, the last messages filled with bravery, and the silence that had followed. The Empress leaned on the balcony railing, staring into the void where his ship had fallen. Stars blinked indifferently as if the universe itself had no answer for her pain. The empire below, once thriving and orderly, seemed muted. Soldiers moved like shadows, their steps heavy with unspoken sorrow. Citizens whispered in the corridors, their eyes reflecting the same fear and uncertainty. Without Kalen, they felt lost, as if the heart of their world had stopped beating. Even her council, the trusted leaders who had advised the empire for centuries, found themselves at a loss. They spoke in careful tones, suggesting plans and strategies, but none could pierce the cloud of mourning that surrounded the Empress. Her grief was a force in itself, commanding attention and respect. Yet it was silent and suffocating, like a storm trapped inside her chest. The Empress turned from the balcony, her hands trembling as she brushed past the ceremonial banners of her house. Each banner carried symbols of victories past, of planets subdued and enemies defeated. But tonight, they seemed hollow reminders of what had been lost. Kalen had been her pride, her joy, and now the colors and symbols of power felt meaningless. She walked through the palace halls, past the statues of ancestors who had ruled for millennia. Their eyes, carved from shining metal, seemed to watch her with judgment or pity. She could never tell which. The halls were quiet, except for the soft hum of life support systems and the distant sounds of the capital city below. Normally, these sounds would comfort her, a reminder that her empire endured. Tonight, they were only echoes of emptiness. In the private chamber where Kalen's belongings were kept, she lingered. The room smelled faintly of his scent, a mixture of the oils he used and the fabric of his uniform. She picked up a small crystal from the desk, one he had carried for luck, and held it tightly. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Xylan did not cry openly, at least not in front of others. Strength was a language and sorrow had to be hidden. As the Empress sat in silence, her mind wandered to memories of her son. His laughter, the way he had once chased young apprentices through the palace gardens, the proud look in his eyes when he received his first command. These memories were both comforting and painful. She had loved him more fiercely than she had loved anything else in the universe, and now that love had become a heavy chain. Suddenly, a soft alarm echoed through the chamber. It was subtle but distinct, the kind that indicated an unregistered ship approaching the palace orbit. The Empress stiffened. Security protocols immediately engaged, and the palace monitors displayed a single small vessel, sleek and unusual in design. It was not Xylan. The markings were strange, unfamiliar. Her advisors rushed to her side, their faces tense. "Empress," one of them said, "a human vessel approaches. It has no weapons. It requests immediate audience." The Empress's eyes narrowed. Humans were rare visitors, often considered primitive and unpredictable. They had no place in Xylan politics, and yet here one was, appearing at a time of great vulnerability. She felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. Despite her grief, a spark of interest flickered within her. Who would come at such a time, and why? "Prepare the audience chamber," she commanded, her voice calm but sharp. "Bring them to me." The advisors hesitated. It was unprecedented. Humans were not known for diplomacy and the timing was suspicious, but none dared disobey. The Empress, though grieving, had an aura of authority that could silence even the boldest skeptic. Meanwhile, the human ship drifted closer to the palace. Its hull gleamed with a faint metallic blue, reflecting the distant stars. Inside, Captain Mara Delwyn adjusted the controls, her heart racing. She had heard tales of the Xylan Empire and its Empress, and she knew this mission was risky. Yet she carried something precious, something she hoped would offer solace to the grieving ruler. She had no weapons, only her courage and the strange cargo in the ship's hold. As the ship docked, the Empress observed from above. She did not descend immediately. There was a strange energy about the human, something different from the usual ambassadors or merchants who visited her palace. It was calm, yet purposeful, a quiet confidence that seemed to demand attention without making a sound. Finally, she descended the grand stairway to the audience chamber. The humans were escorted in by palace guards and Mara stepped forward, bowing slightly. She spoke in Xylan, a language she had painstakingly learned. "Your Majesty," she said, "I come in peace. I bring a gift not for power, not for wealth, but for hope." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "Hope," she repeated, her voice echoing in the chamber. "You arrive at a time of mourning and speak of hope. Tell me, human, do you know what grief is?" Mara nodded. "I do. I have lost much myself, but I have also learned that even in the darkest moments, a small light can guide the way. I ask only that you allow me to show you this light." The Empress studied the human closely. There was something in her eyes, a steady determination that was rare in beings outside her own kind. And for a moment, the heavy cloud of grief seemed to lift slightly, replaced by curiosity. "Very well," the Empress said finally. "Show me this light. But know this, human, if this is a trick, you will not survive the consequences." Mara smiled faintly, unshaken. "I ask nothing of your wrath, only your attention." The human led the Empress to a chamber in the palace gardens, a place that had been untouched since Kaelin's death. It was filled with memorial stones and statues, silent witnesses to the prince's life and loss. Mara opened her cargo and revealed crystalline seeds, glowing faintly with a gentle light. "These seeds," she explained, "can grow in any environment. They are not ordinary plants. They carry energy, vitality, and resilience. They may seem small, but they can bring hope where it seems lost. I bring them for your son and for your people." The Empress looked down at the crystals, unsure whether to believe them. Yet she felt something unexpected, a stirring of warmth, a faint memory of Kaelin smiling as he once tended the palace gardens. She allowed Mara to plant the first seeds near the memorial statue. As the human worked, the Empress walked among the memorial stones, touching each one, whispering the prince's name. The air felt different, lighter, almost alive. For the first time since Kaelin's death, she felt not only grief but also a fragile thread of hope. Outside, the city below stirred as the palace lights shifted, signaling the arrival of the human visitor. Guards and citizens watched cautiously, uncertain of what this meant. Yet none could deny that something extraordinary had entered their midst. The Empress returned to the balcony after the seeds were planted, her eyes tracing the faint glow in the garden below. She did not speak. She did not need to. The human had arrived, unexpected and unarmed, yet carried a presence that even grief could not diminish. For hours the Empress remained there, alone with her thoughts. She thought of Kaelin, of the Empire, and of this strange being from another world. Perhaps the universe still had mysteries left, even for those who had known sorrow too deep to name. And somewhere deep in the void of space, Captain Mara Delwyn prepared for the next steps of her mission, unaware that her arrival had already begun to change the heart of an empire. The stars twinkled silently, indifferent and eternal, yet they seemed brighter tonight, as if acknowledging the first glimmer of hope returning to the Empress and the Xylan people. Days passed in the Xylan palace, and the Empress remained in her private chambers more often than ever. The crystalline seeds that the human had brought were planted in the memorial garden, yet she did not dare hope too soon. She had learned that loss could not be easily replaced, and grief was not something that could be cured with strange gifts or words. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the seeds began to glow. Tiny sprouts of green and silver pushed through the soil, bending as if reaching for the palace lights. The glow was soft, gentle, and comforting, unlike any light the Empress had seen before. She watched it cautiously, unsure whether it was magic, science, or simply her mind playing tricks. Captain Mara Delwyn continued to stay in the palace, though she never intruded upon the Empress. She spent her time tending the garden, speaking quietly to the plants, explaining to the Empress how they drew energy from the environment. She told the Empress that the seeds could adapt to any conditions, grow in harmony with local life, and even bring subtle healing properties to those around them. One evening, as the twin moons of the Xylan planet rose over the horizon, the Empress walked alone into the garden. The sprouts had grown taller, their leaves shimmering like silver and jade. The air smelled fresh and alive, a scent she had not breathed in years. Her hand hovered over the plants, hesitant to touch, yet compelled by a force she could not explain. "You feel it too," Mara said softly from behind her, not startling the Empress. "It's as if they remember your son and they want to help you heal." The Empress did not answer immediately. She looked at the glowing plants, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of something other than grief. A small, fragile warmth stirred in her chest, almost like the memory of Kaelin's laughter in these very gardens. "Do you promise me," the Empress finally asked, her voice quiet and uncertain, "that these plants will bring nothing but peace?" Mara nodded. "I cannot promise what will happen to your heart, Your Majesty, for only you can guide that. But the plants themselves carry life, energy, and hope. They cannot harm, only nurture." The Empress studied her closely. Humans were strange beings, fragile in body, yet strong in ways she had never understood. This human, small and unarmed, had dared to enter her palace uninvited, and now she offered something more valuable than any weapon or technology, a chance for hope. Over the next week, the garden transformed. The plants grew rapidly, their stems stretching and curling into intricate shapes. Small flowers bloomed, emitting soft, soothing lights that pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Birds and small creatures, previously quiet and distant, began to approach the garden. Even the palace guards, who had been skeptical, noticed a change in the atmosphere. Their moods lifted slightly, tension easing as if the garden's energy reached them even through the walls. The Empress observed silently each day. She walked among the glowing plants, whispering the prince's name, sometimes speaking aloud, sometimes only in her mind. The memory of Kaelin felt less like a weight and more like a presence surrounding her. Slowly, the shadow of despair began to lift. Word of the strange garden spread through the city. Citizens and visitors alike came to witness the glowing plants. Some skeptics mocked them, saying it was a trick or a human illusion. Others wept openly, feeling an unexplainable warmth in their hearts. The Empress allowed the visitors only in small numbers, maintaining order, yet she did not forbid them. She began to sense that this small miracle, this human gift, was larger than herself or even her grief. One evening, the Empress sat on a stone bench beside Mara, watching the plants sway under the twin moons. "I admit," she said quietly, "I did not believe at first. I thought a human could not possibly bring anything meaningful to an empire such as mine. Yet now I see that even small things can carry power." Mara smiled. "Hope is always small at first. It grows slowly, quietly. You are not alone in this, Your Majesty. Your people can share it and your empire can grow from it." The Empress turned to Mara, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the garden. "I do not know if I can forgive myself for my weakness," she whispered. for letting grief rule me so completely." "You are not weak," Mara replied gently. "Even the strongest hearts can bend under loss. What matters is what comes next, the choice to rise, to heal, and to act." For the first time in weeks, the Empress felt a clarity she had not known since Kaelin's death. Perhaps grief did not have to be endless. Perhaps even in the depths of loss, something new could take root. She reached out, lightly touching one of the glowing flowers. It pulsed beneath her fingers, gentle and warm, and she allowed herself to smile faintly. As the days passed, subtle miracles began to occur across the empire. Farmers reported their barren fields sprouting new growth, sick creatures regaining strength, and even faint, long-forgotten colors appearing in the sky at dawn. The Xylan people, long used to rigid order and control, began to feel the stirrings of change. Hope, once a fragile concept, began to spread quietly, like ripples in a calm sea. The Empress watched these changes with careful eyes. She did not claim them as her own, nor did she attribute them fully to the human. But she understood that something had shifted, not only in the garden but within her and her people. She began to visit the garden daily, speaking softly to the plants and remembering Kaelin, not only in sorrow but also in love. One morning, Mara approached the Empress with a question. "Your Majesty, will you allow me to travel further into your empire? I wish to see where else these seeds can help. They can grow anywhere, even in places long forgotten or damaged." The Empress hesitated. The idea of sending a human through her empire was risky. Yet she sensed that the human's presence brought more than curiosity, it brought life. "Very well," she said at last, "but you will travel only with my guidance, and you will return here when your task is done." Mara bowed. "I will obey, Your Majesty, thank you." The human's departure through the empire was nothing short of remarkable. Wherever she went, the seeds took root. She visited remote planets, barren moons, and even decaying cities. In each place, the plants grew, glowing softly, and wherever they did, life seemed to respond. Small creatures returned to abandoned fields, polluted rivers cleared, and the air itself seemed lighter. Mara documented everything carefully, but she also noticed the most important change: the hearts of the Xylan people. They began to smile more often, speak with kindness and care for one another. Rivalries that had lasted generations softened. Even soldiers, hardened by centuries of conflict, showed patience and compassion. The Empress, observing from her palace, realized that the human's gift was not just about plants. It was about teaching her people the value of hope, resilience, and empathy. One evening, as Mara returned from her travels, she brought back not only thriving plants but also stories of lives transformed. Farmers who had given up hope now had bountiful harvests. Children played safely in cities that had once been desolate, and communities had begun to rebuild with renewed energy. The Empress listened to these tales, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "You have done more than I could have imagined," the Empress said quietly, standing in the garden with Mara. "Not just for my empire, but for me as well. I thought I would never feel joy again. Yet seeing these changes, I feel that my son's memory is honored in a way I could never have achieved alone." Mara smiled, placing a hand lightly on one of the glowing flowers. "Hope is stronger when shared. Your people carry your son's memory, and now they carry hope as well. That is the greatest gift of all." The Empress nodded. For the first time since Kaelin's death, she felt a sense of peace, fragile but real. She understood that grief would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her entirely. There was room for hope, for growth, and for the light that the human had brought. As the twin moons rose again over the palace, the Empress gazed at the glowing garden, now vibrant and alive. She felt a connection not only to her son, but to something greater, a sense of renewal, a bond with the human who had dared to bring life and hope to an empire in mourning. In that moment, she whispered Kaelin's name into the night sky, and the garden seemed to shimmer in response. Perhaps the prince could feel her love, and perhaps, in some way, he was smiling down upon them. The Empress turned to Mara. "Your gift has changed more than the Empire," she said softly. "It has changed me. I see now that even in loss there is room for life, for growth, and for hope. I will never forget this lesson." Mara nodded. "It is only the beginning, Your Majesty. The universe is full of possibilities, and your people have the strength to reach them. Together, we can build something extraordinary." The Empress looked at the glowing garden, at the thriving plants, and at the human who had come from so far away with nothing but hope. She realized that even in her deepest sorrow, the universe still held wonders she had yet to discover. And for the first time in a long while, she felt that perhaps the future could be brighter than the past. The Xylan Empire was slowly waking from a long shadow of grief. The glow of the human seeds had spread from the palace gardens into distant cities, farms, and even barren moons. Wherever the seeds took root, life responded. Crops once thought impossible to grow flourished. Rivers that had been stagnant began to flow with clarity. Animals that had vanished returned to forests and plains. The people noticed the changes first in subtle ways: a brighter sky, softer winds, the hum of life returning. Yet, the most important transformation was not in the land or creatures, but in the hearts of the Xylan. Soldiers, bureaucrats, and citizens alike began to look at one another differently. Where suspicion and rivalry had reigned, understanding and cooperation slowly took hold. People began to share, to care, to speak with kindness. Markets reopened, communities rebuilt, and long-ignored traditions of compassion resurfaced. The Empress observed all of this from the balcony of her palace. She no longer saw the Empire as a kingdom of sorrow. It was awakening. She felt a new energy in her veins, a mixture of hope, determination, and love. She knew now that her grief, while permanent, could coexist with something brighter. Captain Mara Delwyn returned from her missions across the Empire with news that amazed even the Empress. Entire planets had been rejuvenated, not only physically but socially. Communities that had once been divided were cooperating to rebuild cities. Knowledge and resources were shared freely. Even former rivals worked together to strengthen defenses and improve trade. Humanity's small gift had acted as a catalyst, unlocking potential the Xylan had forgotten existed. "You see what your gift has done," the Empress said quietly, speaking to Mara as they walked through the glowing palace gardens. "Not just for the land, but for my people." "It is extraordinary," Mara nodded. "The seeds were just the beginning, Your Majesty. Your people had the strength all along, but hope was what they needed. Once they saw that life could flourish, they took the next steps themselves." The Empress paused beside one of the glowing flowers, letting her fingers brush its leaves. "Kalen would have been proud," she whispered, remembering her son's bright smile and gentle courage. "I feel his presence here, in the garden, in the air, in all of this." "Perhaps he is part of it too," Mara smiled softly. "In some way he is. The love you had for him and the love he had for your empire helped make this possible. You carried him in your heart, and now that heart has guided others to hope." As days turned into weeks, the Empress began to take more active steps in her empire. She held councils not only with advisors but with local leaders from every region. She encouraged collaboration, sharing of resources, and care for all citizens. She no longer ruled through fear or authority alone. She led through inspiration, example, and the simple truth that life, even after loss, could be nurtured and protected. The glowing gardens became symbols of renewal. They were replicated across the empire, each one planted by humans and Xylan citizens working together. People traveled to these gardens to remember loved ones, to celebrate life, and to find peace in the warmth that the glowing plants brought. Even in the darkest nights, the gardens' soft light reminded them that hope was always possible. One morning, a messenger arrived at the palace with a request from a distant planet. Its people had heard of the gardens and the miracles, and they asked for the Empress's blessing to plant the seeds there. The Empress agreed immediately. Mara prepared the seeds for travel, and together they oversaw the planting. As the first sprouts emerged, the Empress felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "Your gift has not only healed grief," the Empress said to Mara during this planting, "but it has taught my people a lesson they had long forgotten. They see now that life can be nurtured, that hope is powerful, and that even the smallest things can have great meaning." Mara nodded. "And your leadership made it possible. The seeds only grow when hearts are ready. You gave your people permission to hope, and that was the true blessing." The Empress reflected on these words, realizing that the human had shown her more than she had expected. Humans, with all their fragility, carried a resilience and courage that the Xylan had sometimes forgotten. They could teach lessons without force, heal without dominance, and inspire through example. She had once believed that strength was measured by power and control. Now she understood that true strength came from compassion, wisdom, and the courage to hope. In the weeks that followed, the Empire's transformation accelerated. Cities that had been shadows of themselves blossomed into vibrant hubs of culture, trade, and innovation. Children played freely in the streets, laughter filling spaces that had once echoed only with silence. Scholars and scientists collaborated across planets, sharing discoveries and knowledge that had previously been hoarded. Soldiers found purpose not only in defense but in rebuilding, guiding, and protecting life. The Empress watched it all, her heart swelling with pride. The memory of her son was no longer a source of endless sorrow, but a beacon guiding her empire toward renewal. She often walked the palace gardens at night, touching the glowing plants and whispering Kaelin's name. Each night, the light seemed to pulse with his memory, as if acknowledging her love and the hope that now thrived across the empire. One evening, Mara approached the Empress with a request. "Your Majesty, I have completed my work. The seeds have been planted across your empire and their influence is spreading. My task is done, but I must leave soon. You have the power now to continue this work without me." The Empress regarded the human thoughtfully. "You came here unarmed, carrying nothing but hope and small seeds, and yet you have changed my empire more than any army or weapon ever could. I will never forget your courage, your wisdom, or the lesson you have brought." Mara smiled. "You will carry it forward, Your Majesty. Your people are strong and resilient. They have learned to hope, to nurture, and to grow. That is the true power of your leadership and the most enduring gift of all." When the time came, Mara departed in her small ship, leaving the Empress with a final gift, a single crystal seed glowing softly. "Plant this anywhere you choose," Mara said. "It will remind you always that even in grief life can thrive." The Empress held the seed in her hand, feeling its warmth pulse gently. She smiled, a rare and genuine smile, and placed it in the center of the palace garden. As it took root, its glow spread outward, joining the other plants in a symphony of light. She realized that this light, small at first, had grown into a force capable of transforming not only the empire but herself. Years passed, and the Xylan Empire became a legend across galaxies. Travelers spoke of glowing gardens that healed not only the land but the hearts of those who visited. The Empress, now older and wiser, continued to walk among the plants, remembering her son and the human who had brought hope. She had learned that even in loss, life could thrive, and even the smallest spark could illuminate the darkest night. The memory of Kaelin remained alive in the gardens, in the empire, and in the hearts of the people. But it was no longer a shadow of sorrow, it was a guiding light. And somewhere in the stars, Captain Mara Delwyn traveled onward, carrying the knowledge that even the smallest act of courage, kindness, or hope could change the universe in ways unimaginable. The Empress looked up at the sky, twin moons rising, stars twinkling, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Mara, not to the universe, but to life itself. For even in grief she had discovered the strength of hope, the resilience of humanity, and the endless possibilities of a heart willing to grow. The empire had been transformed, the people had been transformed, and the Empress herself had been transformed. Through the courage of one human and the memory of her son, she understood at last that life, fragile, fleeting, yet endlessly beautiful, was the greatest power of all. And as the gardens glowed into the night, spreading light across the palace and city, she knew that this was only the beginning. The Xylan Empire would continue to thrive, guided by hope, nurtured by love, and inspired by the remarkable courage of a human who believed that even the smallest gift could change the galaxy.